What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. So excited to continue this journey with all of you. So, today I want to talk about something that is extremely near and dear to my heart. As some of you may know, if you follow me on Instagram for a while, or if you're just in my life, some of you may not know. A lot of you may not know. I found out that I was Jewish when I was 28 years old, which is a very rare occurrence for someone, from what I've been told. Little backstory: growing up with my dad, he always told me, I don't believe in God. And my mom was a Christian. Dad then got baptized when he got super sick before he passed away at a Lutheran church. So here I am. I grow up in a family where parents are divorced, and mom says I'm a Christian. She takes me to a church called Unity on Sunday, which I did not connect with, but I really liked the singing, and there were lemonade and cookies afterwards. Cool. So that was mom. And dad was like, yeah, no, God doesn't exist. To be fair, he had been through it. So I can understand the apprehension, but at the same time, he ended up realizing, and I quote, he said, in order to maintain my connection with you once I pass and to just make sure that I can continue to protect you, I know that I need to get close to God. So that's when he got baptized. Okay. So he passes, I'm 18 years old, and I have this unbelievable misidentity of myself. Like, I really don't feel close to the Unity church that my mom had introduced to me when I was young. So by the time I'm 18, I stopped going. Let me just tell you what happened. So I'm dating this guy. And by the way, since I'm 18, I'm only dating Jewish men. For some reason, I just love it. I love the fragrance of Judaism. For many reasons, it just resonated deeply with me. So I'm dating this guy. He happens to be Jewish. We start dating in February, like the last week of February in 2016. And we're in the car on the way to a kosher market. Fast forward, this was in, I believe, April 2016. So about a month and a half later, I'm in my car. My mom calls me and she's on Bluetooth, so he can hear what she's saying. And she tells me, what are you doing? And I tell her, oh, I'm on the way to help my boyfriend shop for Passover. And she goes, oh, you're dating a Jew, just like your great 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 grandmother Edith Osherman. I unfortunately didn't really hear what she said. But when I got off the phone, my boyfriend at the time was like, and I look, I'm like, what? And he goes, did you hear your mom? She just said you have a Jewish grandmother. You should run your DNA test and see if you really are indeed Jewish. Because something that happened, back up now, on my first date with my boyfriend, he was like, oh my God, you're my dream girl. You're Italian. Okay, I always wear my Italian horn. I don't know if you guys can see it. So he's like, you're Italian and you're Jewish. This is my dream girl. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm not Jewish. And he's like, what? You always say Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach, and it doesn't make sense. What do you mean you're not Jewish? I'm like, well, I always tell people I'm Jewish, which is and it was an odd thing to do. I'm not going to lie to you. I told people that I was Jewish. And I had been looking up like Aish.org, which was a reference for me for a lot of insight um, for years. And I had, dated Jewish men in the hopes that at some point they would initiate me into their life, and then I would just be Jewish by association. So I told him, listen, I feel very close to Judaism. I really like it. It appeals to me in so many ways, but I'm not Jewish. I'm sorry. And I know for a lot of Jewish men, that can be kind of a deal breaker. So in that moment, which was, like I said, the last week of February, until the time that we had that conversation with my mom, which was in April, there were a lot of things that were being avoided in the conversations with my boyfriend, because we could both feel that things were getting really serious, and I didn't want me not being Jewish to affect where his mind could go for the future, right? Because we know that when a man starts to feel serious for a woman, he starts to think ahead of time. And I just didn't know if at one point he would then say to me, I'm sorry, but this isn't going to work out, or what have you. So I had asked a couple of times, like, well, if I'm not Jewish, would this still be a thing? Would you and I still be a thing? And he kind of, like I said, avoided it. So anyway, moving back to this conversation with my mom, get off the phone. She mentions that my great 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 grandmother has a Jewish last name, Osherman. And so my boyfriend at the time told me, listen, as a gift, I would love to buy you the Ancestry DNA test. And I would really like if you would take the test just to see if you're Jewish. And I said, listen, you can't sway my heart. Like, whatever is in my inner being, nobody can tell me what that is, whether I do a saliva test or I don't. I said, whatever I believe and have faith in, like, I just want that to flow freely through my body. But he told me I would really like it. So, out of respect, I go ahead and take this test. It takes 6 weeks to receive the results. So, in that time, I kind of just put it out of my mind. 6 weeks later, it's like 7:15 in the morning. I'm laying in bed. I check my emails and I get the results, and it says 53% Eastern European Jewish. So I stand up on the top of the bed. My boyfriend is still sleeping, and I start screaming at the top of my lungs, I'm Jewish, and I knew it. I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. And it's crazy because it doesn't matter if it had come back as Jewish or it had come back as anything else, Muslim, or it doesn't matter what it was. It's just the fact that I had felt resonance with Judaism and I ended up actually being Jewish, that it was a big deal for me. So he freaks out and he's like, okay, like, what do we do? So he calls a rabbi, and the rabbi tells him, well, we need documents. We need to be able to prove that this is accurate. So we need to see birth certificates and death certificates and burial plots of all of her grandmothers, because Judaism, it is heavily reliant on the maternal lineage. So I go on a crazy hunt, and I found immigration papers from my great grandmother. Her name is Bina Ehrlich. So I find that she came from Austria in 1896. She went to Indiana, and that's funny because that's where my mom was born. She was born in Indiana, a really small town called Washington, which is like 5 hours outside of Indianapolis, the capital. So I start digging and I find her burial plot. She was buried, there were 6 areas of the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery she could have been buried in. 5 of them were reformed, meaning you could have just married a Jewish man and they would have considered you Jewish and they would have buried you there. One of them was an Orthodox area. And if you were in a plot in that area, that meant that you were actually Jewish by your maternal blood lineage. And you had a process called Haber Kadisha, and you were wrapped uh, beautifully, and you were put into the coffin and what have you. So I ended up finding out after a lot of research and calling many cemeteries and getting proof from a website called jewishgen.com, where it actually shows the picture of the burial plot, which is really cool. So I found that, and I was able to prove through that my great grandmother was buried there. And then I found birth certificates and death certificates of all of my grandmothers. So it ended up being based on all of my research that I was Jewish. So, just a sideline, the reason that the Judaism comes from the mom is because back in the day when Jewish women were in Egypt, they were being raped. And then the men, after they would rape the women, would leave. And you never knew who the father of the child was. So, you couldn't deem the religion based on the father if you don't know who he was. So they used to deem the religion of the baby based on the mom because they could identify the mom with the baby. So that's how that occurred. And so moving forward, after I found all these pieces of paper, I found news articles, I found so many cool, beautiful things. Um, I then had to go to something called a Beit Din. A Beit Din is a rabbinical court, and there's usually 3 to 5 rabbis that stand before you, and they make a declaration of decision based on evidence. So a Beit Din is responsible for the following: divorce, conversion, and obviously my situation was a one-off. I have to tell you that when I had gone through the process of calling different rabbis, asking them for some sort of guidance, They would literally hang up the phone on me because they were so in shock. They had never heard a story like this. They thought I was lying. There were a couple of rabbis where I called them back and I'm like, hello, why did you hang up on me? And they said, there's no way. This doesn't make sense. Can you send me paperwork? Can I see what it is that you found? So I sent emails and I would send paperwork and I would I called rabbis from Israel, from Canada, from Miami, from all over the place. And eventually they set a date where I had to show up. I had to dress sniut. Sniut means you have a long skirt, you're covering your legs. You have a shirt up to here, essentially, and covering the wrists. And you're honoring, the person above out of respect. So I came sniut. It took me like a month and a half, 2 months to get to this appointment. So this was April that I did the test. I got the results back at the end of May. And then I didn't have my appointment with the rabbi until August. So it's a really long time. I had no idea what was going to happen. And, at the same time, my boyfriend kept saying, don't do this for me. Do this for you. Because I can't be the driving force between your inner identity and it has to stem from pure will of your intention, your inner guidance. So that was so hard to hear because there were so many times I wanted to give up. There was no one holding something over me telling me I needed to do this. And I thought, well, if these rabbis push me away, which I had been told that when you go to the Beit Din, they do try to push you away because being Jewish and living a Jewish lifestyle, it's a sacrifice. You sacrifice so much in order to maintain your connection with what they would call Hashem, which is another word for God. So I do see the level of sacrifice varies between person to person. Some Jews don't observe Shabbat, some are not kosher, some don't know their alphabet, some don't pray, some don't withstand different things on Yom Kippur, for example. One Jew will watch TV on Yom Kippur, but he won't eat or drink. One Jew will drink water, but he won't eat and he won't use technology. So there is the ultimate form of respect, which is like making all the sacrifices, but it doesn't mean that you're a happier person, you're a better person. I think there's space for all levels that feel good for the heart and the true being of who you are. So regardless, I dressed sniut. I showed up to the appointment and there were 4 rabbis, one of them that had been flown in from Israel. And they sat there with all my documents. They told me, listen, we made a lot of phone calls. We've done a lot of research and it has come to our attention that you are Jewish. So they gave me this document with my full name and it stated, based on the research and what have you, this girl has been walking around not realizing that she's a Jew, and she is. So she may marry a Jewish man, she may go on living her life. And they asked me a number of questions. Do you plan on being kosher? Do you want to do X, Y, and Z? And I was honest as much as I could be. The last portion of the meeting between me and the rabbis was that they had told me, since I only knew and had proof that my mom was Jewish, I couldn't marry a Cohen. A Cohen is it's someone that has a bit of a deeper connection with the Torah in a way. And they had told me, you don't want to do that because you can't prove that both of your parents are Jewish. So it might just be best for you to just marry a Jewish man, but who's not a Cohen. And I'm saying, okay, no problem. So after this, my life radically changes. I become kosher and I start living in a way where I'm losing an old version of myself and I'm gaining a whole new identity. It was really hard. I went through a lot of transitions and I lost friends and I lost routines and habits and things that I used to do. But I noticed that this new discovery was shifting me from a place where I felt lost and I was doing things to kind of fill what was inside of me to a place where I felt whole and good and more firm in who I was. I had a sense of purpose and I had needed that. My whole life, I had needed an identity, a real firm version of me. So moving forward, I start not only realizing that this shift is helping me and making my life feel more fulfilling, but then on the flip side of the coin, I start receiving a lot of hate and opposition from people who have known me for a long time, saying things like, oh, you're not really Jewish, or you converted, or you're just faking it. Even my very, very, very best friend had a hard time swallowing that so many things were occurring for me and that I was allowing it to happen in a way where I evolved into that. So what I decided to do to combat this difficulty was that I wrote a very long explanation and I posted it to Instagram. I'm like, I did not convert. I am a real Jew. It's weird that I found out at 20 years old, but it's real. And I need everyone to know that. So please get off my back and take a hike if you don't like it. And when I posted that, there is a woman who was related to my dad. So he passed when I was 18. And this woman, it was his sister. I hadn't talked to her for 10 years, right? So from 18 to 28, I had not seen her. I had not talked to her. And she reaches out to me on Facebook and says, hey, I saw your post and I would like to give you something. Can you meet me? And at the time, she was living about an hour away from me. So I ended up getting in the car, driving to go meet her. And she gave me a menorah. And a menorah is like something that you light when Hanukkah comes around for Judaism. So she gives it to me and she says, this was your dad's. And then she gives me a pack of pack of matches that also had like a date on it and it had a Jewish star. And she said that was from his bar mitzvah. So I'm astounded in this moment. And I'm like, wait, my dad was Jewish? She said, yes. I said, how come he never told me? And she's like, well, because in the 1950s, he was made fun of greatly for being Jewish. He was also, overweight, and he came from whatever family he came from. And it was just a point of resistance for him. He experienced a lot of bullying and such, and he never wanted you to experience another reason to feel opposition in this life. So he went ahead and told everyone, never tell Nicole that she's Jewish. It's none of her business. She can live her life outside of that identity. So all in all, I found out that both of my parents were Jewish. My dad never knew my mom was. And towards the tail end of my mom's life, she was able to find out that my dad was, but I don't think it really mattered. Regardless, I feel that their two souls kind of brought them together in that intrinsic divine way where it couldn't have been avoided. It was like fate in a very meaningful way with a lot of depth. And I find that with Judaism, there's a lot of things in Judaism that either I don't understand or I don't want to understand or I don't want to implement in my life for various reasons. But all in all, the meaning in the religion itself has such profound depth where even if you just do a little bit, you will feel that rippling effect of purpose and meaning throughout everything that you do. So yeah, so that's my story on how I found out that I was Jewish. I implore people, and mostly one of the reasons I wanted to make this video on this topic is because I implore people to take a DNA test. If you are at all curious about where you came from and you want to affirm your identity, I think it's so important because here I had lived, let's say, a fourth of my life. So a quarter of my life had passed. And I found out something that was so life-changing. Everything for me changed. Every single thing. So you have to think to yourself, that can be you too. So as always, like and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Instagram. I'll talk to you guys soon.